Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Donald Young, who's here to share with us Leaving the American Dream for Faith. So, do you feel that the life that you're living doesn't really align with your faith? Well, today we're going to dive into just that. For years, Donald Harold Young was a pharmaceutical executive living the American dream, but he was unfulfilled. While he was raised by loving parents and has a master's degree in theology, he wasn't happy and rejected spirituality for many years. It wasn't until he had a profound spiritual awakening that things changed. So welcome to the show, Donald Young.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh my goodness, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about just this topic alone. I think it's so intriguing. Why don't you share a little bit about, because I know you have a memoir that's in the works. Why don't you share a little bit about your memoir with us?
Sure. So I have written a memoir, and I'm in the process of trying to find a literary agent, which I know many people have been down that route before with things. But the memoir is called "Finding God in Vegas: Reimagining the American Dream," and what it's about is my spiritual journey, um, starting as a teenager into kind of present day life. And while the focus is obviously about a spiritual journey, the book is really about love. It's about accepting the love that God has, the universe, whatever you want to call it, for all of us. Learning to love ourselves for who we are and all our imperfections, and knowing that we don't have to be what other people want us to be. And then also about, how we love and take care of each other and our families and friends and community. So that's what it's about, really. At the end of the day, is love.
So I understand that this book isn't about religion. So when you talk about finding God in Vegas, which I understand is a working title for your book,
Yeah, right.
what can you share a little bit about that with us?
Sure, sure. So the reason I kind of came up with the title "Finding God in Vegas" is there were a couple events that happened right before my spiritual awakening. One was having to put our cat to rest, so to speak. He was in terrible pain and suffering, and that was the most difficult thing I've ever had to do in my life. And my heart goes out for everyone who's had to go through something like that. And then the other piece that kind of played in terms of coming into the title was um, I am. We'll talk about this later if you want, but I left kind of the world of pharmaceutical marketing as an executive, and so our lifestyle has changed some. So every time we go to Walmart now, there's a funeral home and a crematorium that I pass, and sometimes you see smoke, quote unquote, smoke, kind of coming out of that uh, the funeral home. And at 57, as I pass by and I see this, I can't help but to think, what is this all about? What has my life been about? And so, as I was thinking about the kind of those two landmarks, I thought, well, I know God was with me when I said goodbye to my cat, and I know God is with us when we leave this world. So it makes sense to me that God would be in Vegas. And coincidentally, when I had my spiritual awakening, it was after we had moved to Las Vegas. So that's kind of how I came up with the title with it.
What a just a reflection into life itself to get to that point. And I do want to touch on your background because I think it has such a profound piece to your story. You're an executive with a pharmaceutical company, right?
With pharmaceutical marketing agencies. So we're the folks that they hire out to put all those lovely ads across all the channels that you see, where everyone by the end of the commercial is happy, and there's usually a dog and a rainbow involved as well. So
Well, and what I mean, because it takes a long time to get to that kind of place.
yeah.
So, how long were you in that career?
Um, well, I started that career in my 20s. I actually my first job into healthcare marketing was through what they call continuing medical education. I had not got into the graduate program that I wanted to get into, so I needed to find a job. I took a temp job doing a lot of clerical work. This was in the 90s, so we still had a lot more paper to file. And one thing led to another, and I found myself in a role at the hospital helping their continuing medical education program. And then kind of from there, it was weird. Kind of fell into it. So I went from a nonprofit to a for profit company that did medical education. And then I went to an agency that did medical communications. And then I went to an agency that did full on pharma advertising, and I apparently had a knack at it because my last employer, I was there for 16 years, and by the time I left, I was COO of an agency of well over almost 300 people, and our focus was pharma advertising. So our clients were pharma clients.
You often hear of people talk about that as like the pinnacle of reaching the American dream. You've worked your way up. Now that here you are, you're COO, things are
Yep.
going to be great and you're going to be so happy. So, what was that like?
Um, I mean, look, the lifestyle that we had. I made an incredible amount of money. We traveled very well in everything that we did. We lived very well with things, but throughout most of my adult life, I was a pretty unhappy person. I mean, I was good at my job, but I don't think I had a passion for it. Well, I'm sure I had no passion for it, but I needed to support my family. And it's nice to surround yourself with nice things, but I always had this sense of emptiness and loneliness about, like, this just there's something missing from my life. And it was really at that time with my adult years. When I was younger, I was very involved with my faith, but in my adult years, where I just you know became a full on materialist. I did not believe in any sort of spirituality or God or anything like that unless I could observe it with my own senses. It didn't exist. So you imagine it's a very, very, very narrow view of how you see the world. Um, so that's where I was at. I was just a very unhappy person, and then I lost my job in my 50s, and I was devastated. I mean, my whole identity, and this is, I'm sure, very common for many people, was wrapped up in my career. And so when the career was gone, I didn't know kind of what to do with myself. And that began a trigger of events that would eventually, lead me to my own spiritual awakening.
So, what was your spiritual awakening like? How did that unfold?
Um, well, it's uh it's a great question because I think for everyone, um, probably has a spiritual awakening in their own way. For me, it was in many ways unexpected, but now when I look back on it, it's not a surprise at all. So I had lost my high paying job, and it was at that time I decided we're going to leave Chicago. I had done my time in the Midwest and had gone through enough winters that I wanted a different climate. So we moved to Vegas. I had no job. We had no family or friends when we moved here. Our cap passed. Then we went through COVID and that craziness that I kind of saw happening. And then I also did a lot of self reflection about my own life and what I spent my career doing, which was marketing pharmaceutical drugs. It didn't help that I started watching things like Crime of the Century or Dope Sick. And for myself, I only speak for myself, I just realized I could not go back to a world of pharmaceutical marketing because I don't feel like I was adding any value to the world and what I was doing. So one evening, I was by myself. and just sat down, put on Johnny Cash, the Last American, his series Last American Recordings, which is really beautiful, beautiful lyrical poetry. And as I sat down and thought about all the things that were happening in my life, I just cried and I broke down. And I could only describe it as humbling of my heart, annihilation of my ego. But I just realized all these labels that I believed in my whole life in terms of being a good American or being a cat father or being a partner or a son, like none of those labels mattered anymore for me. It was really, I am a child of God and I am fine and perfect with who I am. And I don't need to chase anything in this world because it will never bring me happiness. But having a sense of peace with God is what fulfills me now. And after that experience, I just everything just became so different in my life. I was filled with gratitude and humbleness, and I just saw all this beauty that surrounded me, but I never really saw before in my life.
That's so profound. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
And I think you also touch, in your story, and you touch on something that I think relates to a lot of people, is also when someone has gone through a very religious upbringing,
Hmm.
and then they say, hey, well, I'm actually gay. It's like, how do you reconcile the two of them, but being able to find spirituality in a place that makes sense and makes sense for you, I think will resonate with a lot of people too, because God just doesn't live with a certain group of people.
Right. 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 For sure. Um, so, kind of as you touched on that, yeah. I mean, I had a very religious. Loving family upbringing, great people surrounded me. I was involved in Boy Scouts and church. I wanted to be a youth minister at one point, but then I realized, and this is in the 80s, AIDS is kind of full blown all over the news in terms of the crisis that was happening. I realized I was gay, and even though I was raised in a very, I would say, liberal denomination, uh, in the 80s, it was still very different kind of at the ground level. And it's one it's one thing when you say you're supportive of gay people, but then when you find out your son is gay, um, that totally kind of changes everything. So, at this time, I decided, well, I can either, accept and love myself and delight in who God created, or I can be like a good Midwesterner and just kind of bury that and keep that deep down inside, which I did. Because, at that time, I didn't want to be kicked out of Boy Scouts. I didn't want to be ostracized. I knew I couldn't do youth ministry. It just, it would have been devastating for me as a young man. So I decided to choose reputation instead. And this finally kind of came to a head in graduate school. So I spent my entire teenage years and young adult years in the closet. You can imagine that that's not a good place when you're when you know who you are and you're creating all this deceit and lies around you. And I finally came to a point where I wrestled with this, and I realized I'm exactly who God created, and there's no shame around who I am. And I began to kind of love myself. But kind of what happened at the same time was that this time where started to love myself and embrace myself, I also was done with organized religion. So soon after that, I just really abandoned taking care of my spiritual health because I was so exhausted trying to justify who I was, in this world, especially among folks within the religious establishment.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Donald Harold Young in regards to leaving their American dream for faith. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
Hi, I'm Julie Jansis, the angel medium. Want to know how to hear your angels clearly? Listen to the Angels and Awakening podcast every week. And if you want to go even deeper, register for my free 3-day Angel Fest online retreat to know exactly which angels are working with you. Register today at theangelmedium.com/free. That's theangelmedium.com/free.
Hey, pay attention, everybody. Amy Vaughn and myself, Dutch Mendenhall, are hosting an event. Have you ever felt like the wealthiest in America play by a different rule book? Even if you earn well, make money, invest wisely, educate yourself, there is an invisible barrier. It separates you from the financial security enjoyed by America's elite. The economic landscape changes every day. The wealthy elite know how to stay ahead of it because we play by a different rule book. At InvestWell Summit, we'll share all the plays, and we're making it to win. Spots are going to sell out fast at InvestWell Summit, so get your butt to InvestWellSummit.com and secure your seat now.
Lindsay Roy's new book, The Gift of Perspective, is a must-read. Lindsay's unique life stories of surviving and thriving after 2 major life challenges is a wonderful companion to start your new year. It's a great guidebook for anyone facing a challenge, big or small, in business or in life. Lindsay's own stories and the anecdotes of those she met along the way help illuminate real ideas in real circumstances, drawing out reflections and actionable takeaways for all. Full of faith, grit, and humor, this book has the power to change how you see things. The Gift of Perspective is available at Amazon, or visit Lindsay's website at lindsayroy.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Welcome back to Moments with Mary Ann. We're here today with special guest Donald Harold Young in regards to leaving the American dream for faith. Earlier you were mentioning about all these labels, and it's interesting when we peel all of those back, we are so much the same. So, I mean, there's no difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I know I know you talk about God. So, what is your definition of God?
Thank you for asking that question. Because, I know that the word God means a million things to a million different people. But for me, I define God simply as love. And what I mean by love is this unselfishness that sustains our lives, that sustains the universe, that's about energy, that's only about what's best for us, that doesn't want us to live in fear or anxiety, that wants us to take care of each other, to take care of the planet. It's about unselfishness. So that for me is about love. And so when anyone talks about God and it's not about love, but they're trying to sell you fear, or punishment, I I recoil very quickly because I'm like, that's not my experience, and that's not my connection with how I see God. I absolutely believe God loves every single person unconditionally. We all have something to contribute to this world, and we all are of worth and value, and we are here to create love, not to help other people become more rich or powerful.
Why do you think so many people feel spiritually empty right now?
Um, we live, and I was definitely had this similar world view. I mean, we live in a very materialistic world, and I don't mean that it just tries to reduce us to objects or consumers or customers or clients or whatever the term is. But the whole idea of having any sort of spirituality or connection with God it's really it's dismissed by our society, and I don't understand kind of all of like why it is the case. I But I do know is that regardless of this, idea of a particular religion or faith, this idea of spirituality, of connecting to God, to the universe, to something outside of ourselves. I mean, that's been part of the human story since day one. Whether or not you were a shaman or a prophet wandering a desert. This idea that we are material and spiritual creatures has been around since humanity, and so it's very recent within the course of human history where we just think of ourselves as only objects. And I think much like when you talked about labels, that just diminishes who we are, because we are not just a thing. We are a subject as well.
Yeah, how easy it is to be identified by things,
Yeah,
and there's nothing wrong with having things. It's
right.
just that difference that you talk about, which I found very fascinating. So, how do people find common ground with other people in a culture? I mean, we're just all set up to be so divisive. It seems at times. Like, how do we move beyond that?
Um, well, yeah. To your point, the culture is set up as being divisive, us versus them, selling fear, selling anxiety, selling whatever next crisis needs to happen. For me, and I think it's similar to what you just said, Marianne, is that there is. First, I believe we have so much more in common than we have in terms of our differences. At the end of the day, we want to leave healthy and happy lives for ourselves, for our families, for our communities. Like that, we all agree on. So all the rest, I think, is just it's part of that distraction with things. But for me, part of my spiritual awakening was humbling my heart and realizing that I do not know everything. I don't have to know everything, and that when you live with humility and you're curious, um, you will just grow as a person in so many ways. So I think that is one piece, is just if we approach each other with the sense of humility of, I don't know everything. Here's what I do know. Share with me what you know. I'd love to get to know that. Um, and I think it's really important that we talk with people who share our views and talk with people who don't share our views. One of the kind of effects, I think, of social media is that we live in bubbles, and it's so easy for us to live in those bubbles or those echo chambers. When I was growing up, there was kind of no social media, and you had to get along with everyone who was around you. And I don't know, but something happened where there's this big disconnect, where we see our neighbors as our enemies, and that is so far from a message of love. I don't know where that comes from, but it's not coming from a place of love.
I understand completely. I grew up just when computers were coming in, and it sounds like, man, we're really old, right? But it is that era where how life was before. You had real connections with
Yeah,
people. There wasn't, any of this, it wasn't so detached where there's so much of that now. And I actually think it may be accelerating in many ways. So, one of the things, though, I found really interesting, I mean, you've had this profound spiritual awakening.
Mhm.
So, what do you feel your purpose is now since you've had that?
Um, well, I'll say is that since my spiritual awakening, I am just a much more happier, pleasant person to be around, for sure. And I feel that. I mean, everyone that has known me for a long time, or that I connect with recently, and this isn't I'm very much a Midwesterner, so I'm not going to pat myself too much. But I mean, you can just tell when people have a good sense of energy or happiness around them, and I'm not saying everything in our life is happy or great. I mean, I'm trying to reinvent myself at 57. I didn't think this is how I would be spending I wouldn't say retirement, but the as I get closer to retirement, I'm spending down my savings to do this work, uh, because I feel like my passion now and what my life is about is how do I find ways to create more love in the world. And for me, writing a memoir, doing my website is part of that. But the other thing that's changed in my life is that I volunteer my time with several organizations as well, because I can't just write about love. I have to like tangibly do things in the world, um, that make a difference in other people's lives. And when I do that, quite frankly, it makes a difference in my life as well. It keeps me grounded. It gives me perspective. It reminds me of the humility I need to have, and that other people are going through many horrible, tough situations, and if we can find ways to help each other out, um that's I think that really that's why we're here.
I love in the information that you sent over, you talk about in many ways finding that self love, love for others, love for God in the unexpected places. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, for me, part of that one unexpected was, when I had to say goodbye to our cat. That was obviously a very, very difficult time with it. But what I learned through that lesson, and kind of get through in terms of the unexpected places, is that one of the things that I learned is that I thought I only had so much love. Um, and some time had passed, and now we've adopted another cat, and I realized how much I love this cat as much as I love the other cat. And I think for me, what I realized is that when you open yourself up, it's not like a zero. We don't have to live with this mindset of a zero sum game. There is an infinite amount of love, within us, that is there, if we choose to kind of unleash it. So, um, I look I look around me. I look at hummingbirds. I look at trees, and I'm like, wow, they're beautiful. They're amazing. And that to me are like other signs of love, like the beauty that surrounds us, with every day, or even terrible situations. If you look deep enough, at what's happening in terms of people trying to help each other out and cope with it, I mean, the love is there. Love is there. Almost like Mary Tyler Moore. Speaking of our ages growing up, but it opens with love is all around, and I really believe that now. Love is all around.
I think it's such a good message for so many people. Is that one of the messages that you think that people will resonate with your memoir?
Yeah, I do. I've had a few, people who have had very different life experiences from me, read the memoir, and I think that there are situations and examples in there that, that a lot of people can relate to. You don't have to be gay to understand what it's like to live with shame. Um, People have different experiences around, living with shame in their lives because of, who they are, maybe because of where they were born or skin color or whatever the case is, with things. But yeah, that is the primary message. And so when I talk about kind of reimagining the American dream, really what I'm trying to say is that what if we took this idea, this American dream that we're that we're taught and sold and marketed on, and instead of making it about stuff and what I accumulate and about power and wealth, what if it was about how healthy our communities were, how well we took care of our children, how they thrived, you know, the the fact that people had plenty of food, that there wasn't food insecurity, the fact that people had clean water and clean air to breathe. I mean, that to me is really a way to kind of refocus things. Because at the end of the day, I keep going back to it, but I think it is so core that the only legacy you will leave when you leave this world 100 years from now, people probably won't know who Don is, or maybe even not read the book or whatever the case is, and all the other labels. But if there's ways that I created love in the world, that I know lives on, and I do absolutely believe that is our ultimate responsibility.
I agree with you. I agree with you. I mean, there's so many ways that we can show love in the world, like caring for our neighbors.
Yeah,
How are they doing? Maybe a elderly relative, or
yeah,
just being involved more so in the community than being attached to a device or what people are saying.
right, right, absolutely. And to your point, it doesn't. Sometimes we think of, well, we have to do these heroic acts to kind of create love in the world and that, but no, it's there's all these simple, easy things that we can do in terms of taking our care of ourselves, taking care of our families, taking care of our neighbors. And it's just even stuff like, when I go out in public now, I say hello to people, I acknowledge them, or say thank you if they did something nice, or please, you know what I mean? It's just, once you begin to kind of understand that that's the way to live a life, it almost becomes second nature, as well.
Well, what a lovely note to end this discussion on. Donald, where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about your work and the different things you provide?
Sure. They can visit my website. It's donaldharoldyoung.com, DonaldHarold young.com. And there are daily devotions, some writings that did not make the book. And I also have a blog post that comes out every other Wednesday as well.
Well, Donald, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you, Marianne. Really loved our conversation.
Well, thank you, Donald. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about leaving the American dream for faith. Make sure to visit Donald's website at donaldharoldyoung.com for more information and to be part of his community. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.